What's up guys, this is Eric Vasquez here with a brand new tutorial for you today from designcuts.com. Now in this tutorial we're going to be learning how to create some cool hyper space age album artwork that we're going to be creating using the diverse textures and patterns collection, which you guys can check out right now. It's an extremely diverse collection of popular textures and patterns guaranteed to enhance your design projects. Now for this tutorial we're going to be using a small handful of freebies from this, just from a few of the artists such as ArtistMef, Honnum Graphic Art, and RuleByArt. So if you're all ready to get started, then fire up Photoshop and let's begin. Now the first thing we want to do is set up our document here. So I'm just going to create a new document and I'm going to call it Hyperdrive Album Cover Art. That's going to be the name of our album that we're creating today. And we're going to make it 15 by 15 inches with a resolution of 300. You can leave the color mode set to RGB, 8-bit, and the background contents can remain set to black. Then go ahead and hit create. Alright, now the first thing we're going to do is come up here to the file menu and we want to choose place embedded so that we can bring in our first freebie. Now the one that we're going to be using first is going to be from RuleByArt. Okay, and it's going to be this image 32.jpg. which is this cool image of a planet here. Now there's a whole bunch of these from the Mega Box bundle in this pack, which you guys can check out. And there's probably hundreds of planets in there that you guys can use, all kinds of different sizes, crops, and colors. It's a really cool pack, and we're just going to be using this single one today. Now, the first thing we want to do once we bring this in here is notice that you have a bounding box around the image. Now, if we hold the Control key and click on it, we can choose Flip Vertical. And then before we press Return to apply the changes, let's go ahead and move our cursor over any of the four corners is fine, but hold the Alt, Option, and Shift keys and just drag outwards a bit so that you can scale this up from the center. Alright, and then once it's about there, go ahead and press Enter or Return on the keyboard just to place it. Now, the next thing we're going to do is create a new layer, so come over here to the Layers palette and click on this icon on the bottom that says Create a New Layer. And now press the letter G on the keyboard to get your gradient tool. Now, as soon as you do that, you should see some of these options along the top toolbar here. Now, we want to go ahead and check off the Radial Gradient option and make sure that we have a solid to transparent gradient, which we do. If you guys don't see this, simply click on it and check out over here in your gradient editor and look at your presets. You should have one right here that's a preset that will look like this, and it's solid to transparent, and it just has those white and gray checkers behind it indicating the transparency. Okay, so once you have that set, go ahead and click OK. And now let's just go ahead and change our fill color. Now instead of using solid black, we're going to enter the hex value 0E33B8, which is this nice shade of blue here. Go ahead and click OK. Now we're just going to click and drag while holding the Shift key to create our gradient. Now I'll press Command Control plus T to do a free transform and maybe just make it a little bit larger by dragging outwards again from any of the four corners while holding Alt, Option, and Shift. Now go ahead and press Return to apply the changes, and then come over here and we're going to change the blend mode from normal to screen. Okay, and that's just going to give us this cool kind of blended light effect. But let's press Command Control T one more time, move your cursor over either the right or left handles here, hold the Alt Option key, and then just drag it out sideways a little bit just to make it a little bit wider. Somewhere about there looks good. And then go ahead and press Return once again. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and create another new layer. And now let's change the fill color once again. This time we'll enter the hex value F28164, which is this nice kind of light orange salmon-y color here. Go ahead and click OK. Press the letter G on the keyboard. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click and drag outwards from the center while holding the Shift key. Okay, and then maybe let's just scale it up a little bit here as well. Command Control plus T, and then drag out while holding Alt, Option, and Shift. And what I'm going to do is move it over here towards the left edge. All right, make it a little bit bigger. And you can see that the center point here is on the left of the document. So once you have that there, go ahead and press Return. Now this time we're going to change the blending mode from normal to pin light. And that's going to have a very different effect. So with screen, you could see it kind of created this nice cool cast color, but it's basically the same color. But when we did pin light, it made it this more of a deep kind of intense looking red. Let's select that layer, and we're just going to double click on the layer 2 text here and just rename this layer Pin Light. And while we're at it, we can go ahead and double click and rename the layer below Blue Gradient. And now we'll select the pin light gradient, press Command J to duplicate it, then press V to get your move tool, Command T to do a free transform, and now click and then hold the Shift key to move this over towards the opposite side. All right, somewhere about here. It doesn't have to be in exactly the same spot. And then go ahead and press return. Now for this gradient, we're going to change the blend mode from pin light to maybe divide. Okay, and that's going to have an even different effect. So let's double click to rename this layer divide. Now select the top gradient here, hold shift and select the pin light gradient below, and then click on this little folder icon down here at the bottom of the layers palette to put it into a group folder. Double click the group 1 text and just rename this red gradients. Now the next thing we're going to do is select the 32, the planet smart object layer, and then press W on the keyboard, and that's going to give us our magic wand tool. Now take a look at the top toolbar here, and you want to check to make sure that the tolerance setting is set to about 18, and then we're just going to go ahead and click on a piece of the background here. Now we've got most of the background selected, but we want to get a closer selection to the planet here. So to add to our current selection, I'm going to hold the Shift key, and you'll notice the little plus icon that appears, and then I'm just going to click to add to my selection. Now zoom in a little bit if you have to, and continue to do this until you get all of that background selected. Okay, and there's a little piece down here that I don't want, so instead of holding Shift and clicking, I'm going to hold the Alt-Option key and just click on that to deselect it. And you may have to do it a couple of times just to get a better, cleaner selection, but if you mess up at any point, you can just press Command Z to undo. All right. Let's just try and get a nice clean selection here. There we go. Now that we have that, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, select my red gradients folder, and then click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers palette. And that's just going to make it so that we now have a layer mask on our red gradients group folder. And you can see when I turn that on and off, that now these lights are only visible behind the planet, whereas the blue light is visible on top of it. All right, let's go ahead and add another new layer above the red gradients group folder. Press G to get your gradient tool once again. And this time, let's go ahead and change the fill color to B74D60. Go ahead and press OK. And once again, click and drag from the center while holding Shift. And you can see that we now have created another radial gradient. Now this time, I'm going to press Command T to do a free transform. Move it down here over the bottom. I'm just going to select this top handle and maybe stretch it up a bit so it's a little bit more vertical. Slide it down like that. Okay, and then we're just going to change the blend mode here from normal to subtract. Okay, and that's going to create this nice kind of dark fade on the bottom. Press Command J to duplicate it. Press V to get your move tool, then Command T to do a free transform. Click and hold the Shift key and slide this one over to the opposite side. Now I'm going to select the top copy, hold Shift and select the copy below. And instead of clicking on the folder icon this time, let's use the keyboard shortcut Command and G. All right, double click the group 1 text. And I'm just going to rename this folder Pink Gradients. All right, even though it doesn't look pink now, at least we'll know what it is. Now I'm going to select this top Pink Gradients group folder, hold the Shift key and select the Planet Smart Object layer here, and then press Command G once again to put them all into a group folder. Then I'm just going to rename RuleByArt so that I know it's all these kind of layers that we have associated with our main planet image here. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to double click on the background layer, click OK, rename this layer maybe BG, all right, and then put this in a folder as well. So Command G, and then I'm just going to call it BG for now. Now let's go back up here to File and choose Place Embedded so we can bring in our next freebie. Now this time we're looking for an image from ArtistMef, which is this really cool space explosion image. It's super fun, super colorful, and it's just this 8 JPEG file. So go ahead and select that and then choose Place. And now once this image is brought in here, you can't see it actually because it's underneath our RuleByArt group folder. We're going to hold the Alt-Option key and then drag outwards from any of the 4 corners of the bounding box and scale it up just until the height matches the height of your document. So we want to make sure that the whole canvas is covered here. Then go ahead and press Return. And now, in order to move this above our RuleByArt group folder, well, you can either click and drag it above it like this, or just use the keyboard shortcut Command Control and the right bracket. Now the next thing we're going to do is change the blend mode here from normal to screen. So again, we can see the planet below, which looks pretty cool already. All right, so now we're going to create a curves adjustment layer. So select the 8 Smart Object layer, hold the Alt-Option key, and click on the little adjustment layer icon at the bottom of the layers palette here that looks like a black, half white circle, and then go ahead and click on curves. And now, once this pops up, we're going to check off this box that says use previous layer to create clipping mask, and then click OK. And what that's going to do is make it so any adjustments we make here are only visible on this space explosion image. Now all we're going to do in the properties is click in the middle of the grid to add a point, and then just move it down and to the right a bit, and you can see that it's just kind of adding some nice contrast here. So ideally we want the input to be somewhere around 160, and the output can be set to around maybe the low 90s, somewhere about there. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then I'm just going to select that curves adjustment layer, hold shift and select the smart object layer below. Press Command G to put it into a group folder, and then I'm just going to call this one ArtistMef, just so we can have that labeled as well. Okay, now again, let's open the RuleByArt folder here, and I'm going to hold the Command Control key and click on the layer mask thumbnail icon from the red gradients folder. Okay, and that's going to activate the same selection that we used before. So you should still have your ArtistMef folder selected while this selection is also active. And what we're going to do then is now add a layer mask. And that's going to apply the same layer mask that we used before, so that we can now only see this explosion image behind the planet. Now let's come back up to File and choose Place Embedded once again. And this time we're going to go and grab a cool looking vintage texture from the Freebies folder for this tutorial. So find the Honnum Graphic Art folder and choose Textures Volume 148, and then click Place. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing here. Hold Alt, Option, and Shift, and scale it up just so it fills out the canvas like that. Alright, and then go ahead and press Return to apply the changes. Now, just like we did before with our clipping mask, we're going to hold the Alt Option key once again, click on the adjustment layer icon at the bottom, and now choose Levels from the menu, and check off this box that says Use Previous Layer to create clipping mask, and then hit OK. Now, let's move this left gray slider in the properties in towards the right until it's set to about 40 or 41. Now I'll come back and select the Textures Volume 148 Smart Object layer, come back down to the adjustment layer icon, and this time choose Hue Saturation, and you'll see that it automatically has a clipping mask applied, but I still want this to be above the levels because the order in which you have these adjustment layers applied can still change the appearance. So let's go ahead and press Command in the right bracket just to move that up one position. And all we're going to do here is move the hue slider up all the way to 180. Now select the Smart Object layer once again so that we can add a third adjustment layer, which in this case is going to be the black and white adjustment layer. And this time we want to place this above both of the previous two adjustment layers. So again, press Command and the right bracket key 2 times to move it up 2 spots in the layers palette. Now I'm going to select the top black and white adjustment layer, hold shift and select the texture, press Command G to put it into a group folder, and this one will just be called Honnum Graphic Art. Now we're going to select this whole group folder here and change the blending mode of the folder from pass through to screen. Okay, now if I come in this folder and I just select the texture layer, I can press Command T to do a free transform, and you can just move the texture around and see how it's affecting the appearance of your image. Okay, so find a placement that you're happy with, and then go ahead and hit Return to apply the changes. Now let's go ahead and create a new layer at the top of our layers palette just by clicking on that icon at the bottom here. And then I'm going to press letter D on the keyboard. And what that's going to do is give me my default colors of black and white. So you should now have solid black as your foreground color. And then all you have to do is press Alt, Option, and Delete on the keyboard to fill your new layer with your foreground color. Now from there, we're going to come up to the filter menu and choose Render Clouds. Okay, and that's just going to create and generate this kind of cloud texture on top of our image here. What we want to do is make it a lot larger. So go ahead and press Command T to do a free transform. Zoom out by pressing Command and the minus key a few times, and then hold Alt, Option, and Shift and just drag outwards from any of the 4 corners of the bounding box to scale this up. Go ahead and press Return to apply the changes, and then once that finishes transforming, press Command 0 to fit it back to your screen, change the blending mode from normal to overlay, and then drop the opacity down to about 40% just by pressing the number 4 on the keyboard. Double-click the Layer 2 text and change the name of this layer to Clouds. Put it in a group folder, Command G, and do the same thing. Just give it the same name as the layer for now, just to help keep everything organized. Now, once again, we're going to use the same layer mask that we used before for the ArtistMef folder. So now hold the Command Control key, click on the mask thumbnail icon, and then while you still have your clouds group folder selected, add a layer mask. Okay, so now you can only see the clouds behind the planet. Now let's use that selection again to do something else. This time we're going to invert that selection. So hold Command Control, click on the layer mask thumbnail over here, and you should have that same selection active. Now come up to the Select menu and choose Inverse to inverse the selection, and now we'll only have the planet selected. Okay, so now go ahead and add a new layer while your selection is still active. Press the letter X on the keyboard to toggle your foreground and background colors so that you now have white as your foreground color. And now on our new layer, we're going to press Alt, Option, and Delete to fill this selection with white. Before we do anything else, come up to the Select menu, choose Modify, Contract, and contract this by about 20 pixels and click OK. And what that's done is just brought our selection in by 20 pixels. So we can now press Delete on the keyboard and then Command D to deselect all, and you'll see that you are now just left with this kind of white ring around the edges. Okay, so what we're going to do now is change the blend mode from normal to overlay. Come up to the filter menu and choose Blur, Gaussian Blur, and apply a blur of about 18 to 20 pixels, and then choose OK. All right, and that's just going to give you this nice kind of rim light, this glow effect. But if you want to intensify this effect a little bit to make it a little bit stronger, all you have to do is press Command J, and that's just going to duplicate the layer. Okay, and you can see what happens if you add maybe a third or a fourth copy. It's just getting stronger each time. So you can, kind of set it up with as many copies as you like, but I think 2 or 3 copies is probably okay. Now select the top copy, hold Shift and select the original layer, and then press Command G to put it into a group folder. And I'm just going to rename this folder Ring Glow, and then add a layer mask to it. Press G on the keyboard to get your gradient tool once again, and then make sure that you still have a black to transparent gradient selected, and change it from a radial gradient to a linear gradient. Now what I'm going to do is come over here to the left, just off to the side of my canvas, click, hold the Shift key, and drag in towards the center. Alright, and that's just going to fade out some of that ring glow. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side to fade it out so that the majority of the glow is just kind of on the center here. And you can see in your layer mask over here how it kind of has black on both sides. Alright, so let's create another new layer. Press G to get your gradient tool again. And this time go back to the radial gradient, and we want to make it so that we have a white to transparent gradient. So originally before up here in the preview box I was seeing black as the color, so all I did was press X to toggle it so that it now shows up as white. Alright, so again, if I click on the gradient editor, you should see it fading from white to transparent, and then click OK. Now I'm going to click and drag from the top center of the planet up, press V to get my move tool, then Command Control plus T to do a free transform, hold the Alt Option key and move your cursor over either the left or the right handle and just drag it out to the sides to make it wider. And then move your cursor over the top or the bottom handle, hold Alt Option, and then just drag inwards a bit. Alright, so we're just squishing this down a little bit. Now we're going to change the blend mode here from normal to overlay, and that's just going to create this nice center highlight here. So let's press Command J to intensify the effect, then Command T to do a free transform, hold Alt Option and Shift, and just drag inwards to scale it down so that this copy here, this second highlight layer, will be more concentrated on the center of the image. Then select the top copy, hold Shift and select the original below, press Command G to put it into a group folder, double click the Group 1 text, and just rename this layer Center Highlight. Okay? Just going to fix that. And we're doing pretty good so far. That's looking good. Alright, now I'm going to zoom out for a second here just so we can take a look at our image. It's looking pretty good so far, but I want to keep the focus down here at the brightest point. So what I'm going to do is create a little bit of a vignette along the top here. So go ahead and create a new layer. Press G once again to get your gradient tool. Grab a linear gradient, and then press X to toggle so you have a black to transparent gradient. And now all I'm going to do is click and drag from the upper left corner inwards, and then come to the center, click, hold the Shift key and drag down. Okay, and then come to the upper right corner and click and drag inwards a little bit there as well. Just so we create a little bit of a nice kind of faded vignette up here, which you guys can see is kind of helping to keep the focus in the center of the image. Okay, I'm just going to rename this layer top fade, and just throw it in a folder for now with the same name. And then go ahead and add another new layer. Now this time what we're going to do is press T on the keyboard to get our type tool, click anywhere down here in the bottom part of the planet, and we're going to type out the word hyperdrive. Now if you don't have your character panel available to you here, all you have to do is come up to the window menu and choose character from the list. Now once you have the character panel, we're going to make sure that we have, I'm using the font Avenir next, but you guys can use any clean sans serif font that has a nice bold weight to it. Okay, so I'm going to change it from medium to bold just to make it a little bit heavier. And then let's go ahead and maybe change the size to about 70. And we'll also change the tracking setting here from 20 to 380 just to space those letters out nicely. And for the color, you can leave it set to solid white. Then go ahead and grab your move tool. And we're just going to move this over here so that it's centered in the bottom of the planet. All right, maybe just tap it up a few times. Next, we're going to press Command J to duplicate the layer, then Command in the left bracket to move it down one spot. Hold the Shift key, and then just hold the down arrow to move it down. Press T again to get your type tool. Click inside 2 or 3 times to highlight the text. And now we're going to type out the words, explore the void. And you'll notice I'm doing this in all caps. All right, click inside here to select this text. And we're going to use the same font, but I'm going to change the size to maybe about 24 point. And then let's go ahead and expand the tracking out to be about 900. All right, so that sounds like a lot, but when the text is that small, it's really not that big of a difference. Okay, but it looks good. Just some nice kind of open spacing here, a nice clean font like this. Looks pretty sweet. All right, so let's duplicate that layer one more time. Press Command J, then Command in the left bracket to move it down. Hold Shift in the down arrow, and we're going to move this layer a little bit further down just to leave some space. And then press T to click inside. And let's just go ahead and type out Uplifting Trance Anthology by Borealis. Let's go ahead and click inside to highlight the text once again. And now we'll change the size of this text to about 17. And we can bring the tracking back down to 20. Still using a solid white, upper and lowercase for this part. And then just click on your move tool to kind of deselect it. Okay, so we've got our title set up here, but I want to add a little border or divider in the middle of these 2 lines of text. So I'm going to create another new layer at the top, press G on the keyboard, grab a Radial Gradient fading from white to transparent. I'm going to move the character panel off to the side here. And now just click and drag outwards while holding the Shift key, press Command T to do a free transform, and then move your cursor over either the left or the right handles, and while holding Alt, Option, and Shift, drag out to once again kind of bring this out here, and then move your cursor over the top or the bottom, hold Alt Option, and then bring it in. So we're just really squishing this down here. We're trying to make it look like a nice kind of tapered line, something like that. Okay, and let's zoom in a little bit here just so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to close the character panel because we're done with that. And I'm going to change the blend mode now from normal to overlay. Okay, and you can't really tell right now, but once we build this up, it'll be a more noticeable effect. Let's go ahead and create another new layer. Press G on the keyboard. And now let's go ahead and toggle our foreground and background color. So press X on the keyboard so that you have solid black. Click on that color. And now what we're going to do is create a different color for our gradient. So I'm going to type in the hex value 294694 to get another nice blue. And then go ahead and click OK. Click and drag outwards to create your blue gradient. Press Command T to do a free transform. And do the same thing where we're going to extend it out to the sides and then squish it down in the middle, somewhere about there. Okay, and then let's just go ahead and change the blending mode of this layer from normal to color dodge. All right, maybe even squish it a little bit more, somewhere about there. Okay, and now select the layer below, which is our white overlay layer. And now you can see it a little bit more, but I want to intensify this effect and push it further. So I'll press Command J, and then Command in the right bracket to move it above the blue color dodge layer. Then go ahead and duplicate this top layer once more, just to really push that effect. Okay, and if you want to now select the blue gradient layer, press Command T, maybe just bring it in so it's a little bit tighter. All right, somewhere about there looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is select this bottom gradient layer, hold the Shift key and select the top one, press Command G to put them into a group folder, double click the group 1 text, and change the name of this folder to highlight bar. Okay, it just sounds pretty basic, but that way we know what it is. Now that we've done that, select the group folder, hold the Alt Option key and click on the adjustment layer icon. And now let's add a hue saturation adjustment layer and check off this box that says use previous layer to create clipping mask. Go ahead and click OK. All right, and we now have a clipping mask applied to not just one layer, but this entire folder. Okay, so we're going to check off this colorize box here in the properties for the hue saturation adjustment layer. And then what we're going to do is move the hue down to 0. And let's move the saturation to about 70, 75, somewhere about there. All right, press G once again to get your gradient tool. And now press X just to toggle it back and forth until you have a solid black to transparent gradient, and change it from radial back to linear. Now what we're going to do is click off to the right, hold the Shift key, and drag inwards towards the center. Okay, and that's just going to fade out our gradient a little bit, so that now we can only see the red on the left side. But in order to intensify this effect more, I'm going to open the highlight bar group folder, select the blue color dodge layer, and maybe duplicate it once or twice. All right, just to intensify that effect so that you can see more of the blue here. All right, and then once you're happy with that, go ahead and collapse the folder, press Command T to grab everything inside of the folder, and then hold the Alt Option key and maybe just squeeze it down just a little bit more, and then bring it in a little bit as well. Okay, so that you end up with just this nice, thin, glowing border like that. All right, and that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to select the top hue saturation adjustment layer, hold the Shift key and select my bottom text layer, then press Command G to put it in a group folder, and just double click the group 1 text and rename this layer TT for title treatment. Now select the title treatment folder, hold Shift and select the BG folder all the way on the bottom, and press Command G to put everything into a group folder that we can now just call artwork. Press Command 0 to zoom out and fit everything to your screen, and we're now going to duplicate all of the artwork, this entire folder here, by pressing Command J, and then merge it together by pressing Command E on the keyboard. Now I'm just going to rename this layer artwork and add merge to the end, and then be sure to save your work before we move on. So now that we have our artwork set up here for the album cover, let's go ahead and apply it to our mockup. Now for this part of the tutorial, I'm using this free vinyl record PSD mockup from Graphic Burger, which you guys can download by following the link in the written portion of this tutorial. It's totally free and it looks pretty nice. So go ahead and open it up in Photoshop here, and the first thing you'll notice is that you have a couple of layers. You've got a cover folder, a vinyl folder, an adjustment layer, and just a background. So I'm going to select the vinyl folder layer and then hold the Shift key and tap it over to the left until that middle color part is hidden, because we're not really too concerned with designing that portion for now. We're just going to be worrying about the cover. Okay, so open up the cover group folder, and you'll see right here on top there's a smart object that says your design here. So let's double click on that smart object layer to open it up. And I'm not worried about the fonts, so I'm just going to choose Don't Resolve. But what I want to do now is come back to our cover art, and I'm going to select that top artwork merged layer, and then just click and drag and drop it into this smart object layer. Now, as you can see, it is pretty big because we're actually designed it at a higher resolution than the resolution of this file. But that's okay, that's a quick fix. We're just going to press Command T to do a free transform, Command 0 to fit it to your screen so that you can see the entire outer bounds of this artwork. Now hold the Alt Option and Shift keys and drag inwards to scale it down. Okay, and then I'm just going to hold the Shift key and maybe drag it up into position here. Zoom in a little bit to see how we're looking, and that looks pretty good. Now go ahead and press Command S to save it, and then Command W to close out of that window, and you should now see your artwork placed on this nice vinyl record mockup. I'm going to click on that arrow just to collapse the cover folder, select the top folder, hold Shift and select the vinyl folder, and then maybe just tap it over to the right a couple of times, just so we can kind of visually center it a little bit. Okay, and now just to make one last adjustment here, let's go ahead and select this Change BG Color adjustment layer here, and open up the Properties panel. And now you'll see this option checked off here for color, so go ahead and click on that color thumbnail And all we're going to do here is enter the hex value 2D4F4E, which is this nice kind of greenish blue color here. All right, but you guys can really make it any color you want for the background. It's all about just making a nice presentation with your design, because the presentation is so important. You know, it's easy to just look at a flat image, but when you see how it's, you know, meant to be received, it really gives people some context and really helps sell the idea. So that about sums up our Hyperdrive album cover artwork design here. And we've created a pretty cool design here just using a small handful of these elements from the diverse textures and patterns collection. But I strongly encourage you guys to go ahead and check out the full bundle to see all of the great stuff that's inside. I mean, we barely just scratched the surface here, but you can do so much with this, and it'll really help you guys step up your work. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial today and learned a few tips and tricks, and thank you guys so much for following along. As always, we'd love to see what you guys do with these techniques and with this bundle in your own work. Once again, my name is Eric Vasquez here for Design Cuts. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.